ever told you that you've been following laws your entire life that were never written down? No judge signed them, no government passed them, and no one ever officially taught them to you. And yet, you obey them every single day. When we think about justice, we usually imagine courtrooms, gavels, constitutions, and legal codes. We picture fairness being decided by judges and written into law. But I've started to realize something. Justice doesn't only come from courts. It also comes from the invisible rules that we never question. Because long before something becomes an official rule, something else exists first: expectations. Quiet expectations that shape how we speak, how we act, and sometimes how we see ourselves. And those expectations quietly decide who gets listened to, who gets interrupted, who gets forgiven, and who gets labeled. No one announces these rules, but somehow we all learn them. And honestly, they shape our lives more than most written laws ever will. I've gone to school here long enough to notice something. There are expectations that aren't on the website. They aren't in the handbook, but they absolutely exist. Unspoken ideas about what confidence looks like, what leadership looks like, what kind of personality gets taken seriously. No teacher stands up and says, here's a type of student that we value more. But somehow we figure it out. We learn it the same way people learn any unwritten system, by watching patterns. Who gets called on first? Who people naturally listen to? Whose mistakes get brushed off and whose mistakes seem to stick? Over time, those patterns start teaching us something, not through instructions, but through signals. And those signals slowly shape how we behave. We change how loudly we speak, how strongly we disagree, sometimes even parts of who we are, just to stay within the invisible boundaries that we've learned. But here's the deeper part. These rules don't guide behavior. They quietly distribute power. The people who understand the rules often gain power. The people who don't often get judged by them. Think about school for a moment. There's no official rule that says some students are leaders and others are troublemakers. And yet, somehow, we always know who is who. We know whose jokes are considered funny and whose are considered disrespectful. We know who can speak confidently without being called bossy. We know whose ideas are treated like contributions and whose ideas are treated like disruptions. Same behavior, different judgment. And that difference isn't random. It comes from the invisible expectations that we've all learned to recognize. The strange thing about invisible rules is that no one thinks they created them, but somehow we keep reinforcing them. No one hands you a handbook titled, How to Behave So People Accept You, but you learn by watching, by trial and error, by feeling that subtle shift in the room when you say something that breaks the invisible rules. And the consequence isn't detention. It's quieter than that. It's the moment people stop listening. The moment your idea gets ignored. The moment you decide, maybe it's safer not to say that next time. That's a law, an invisible one. We talk a lot about the legal system, but there's another system operating around us every day, a social legal system, and it never shuts off. In this system, attention can act like currency, popularity can act like power, and silence can act like punishment. Breaking the rules doesn't get you arrested, it gets you excluded. Every community has these invisible codes. How loud you're allowed to be, how emotional you're allowed to be, how ambitious you're allowed to be, how different you're allowed to be. And here's the surprising part. Most of the time, these rules aren't enforced by teachers or principals. They're enforced by us. We laugh when someone breaks the norm. We label someone as too much. We decide, sometimes in a split second, whose voice feels legitimate. And those tiny reactions might seem insignificant, but together, they create a powerful system. Because every time someone speaks in a group, a silent vote happens. No ballots, no instructions. Some voices rise, others disappear. Some ideas spread and others vanish. And the wild part is this. Every one of us is both the voter and the candidate at the same time. The most powerful rules of a society are often the ones nobody remembers agreeing to. But these invisible rules don't affect everyone equally. The exact same behavior can be praised in one person and criticized in another. A confident speaker might be called a leader. Someone else saying the exact same thing might be labeled as aggressive. Same words, different label. And that's how unfairness can exist even in communities that genuinely believe they are fair. Because the rules themselves were never examined. They just became normal. That's what makes invisible rules so powerful. They don't feel like just rules. They feel like reality. They feel like just the way things are. And when something feels normal, we rarely stop to question it. But the moment you start noticing these patterns, something changes. You begin seeing the system behind everyday interactions. You start asking different questions. Who benefits from this expectation? Who gets silenced by it? Whose voice is missing because of it? Once you see these invisible rules, you can't really unsee them. And that awareness gives you something powerful. Choice. Because change doesn't always start with revolutions. Sometimes it starts with attention. Listening to someone who usually gets ignored. Not laughing when someone is unfairly labeled. Making space for the quiet voice in the room. Those small decisions start to shift what the normal rules are. They slowly rewrite the invisible system. And once you start noticing these rules in school, you begin seeing them everywhere. In workplaces, in politics, in media, in everyday conversations. Justice doesn't only live in constitutions or courtrooms. It lives in classrooms, in conversations, in the everyday decisions we make about who we listen to and who we overlook. Because the moment we make invisible rules visible, they begin to lose their power. And the moment we start questioning them, we begin building something better. Not just a system that looks fair, but a community where fairness is something we actively create. Thank you.